Guys, welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. This is episode number 501. Can you believe 501 episodes? We're going to be coming up this February on actually the 4-year anniversary of this podcast. I want to thank you guys for all your avid support of this podcast. And I want to announce that Onyx Hunt, onxmaps.com, is a new sponsor of the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. And if you use the JScott18 promo code, you're going to get a 20% discount. Now, this is good at onxmap.com, the website. It's good for purchases of one premium state or an elite membership of all 50 states. Also, with this membership, you can get an update of all your old Onyx GPS chips for free at the online web map at onxmaps.com. And Onyx is an app that I use every day. I use it here at the Ot6 Ranch. I use it on my desert bighorn sheep hunts, my turkey hunts, my elk and deer hunts. And it's been an app that I've been using for a few years now, and it's an amazing app, and I hope you guys get a chance. If you don't already have the app, go to onxmaps.com, use the JScott18 promo code, and on my Instagram account, I have been kind of showing how Onyx Map works and how I use it every day with the different waypoint features, measuring line distances, trying to figure out ambush points here hunting elk and mule deer on the Ot6 Ranch. And moving forward, when I have these sheep hunts coming up, I'm going to also be featuring how to use Onyx Maps. So guys, I get a lot of emails wanting to know how you guys can help and support me. I say support the sponsors of this podcast, and I appreciate your loyal and avid support. Let's get right to this episode with Clay Bundy, episode number 501.
Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we're going to have a fun episode with Clay Bundy of Clay Bundy Outfitters out of St. George, Utah. Clay, how you doing?
Fantastic. Thanks for inviting me.
You know, I say St. George, Utah, but the reality is it's via the Arizona Strip. That's your home away from home. You do have a place in St. George, Utah, but we've talked about on the podcast before, you've basically grown up out on the Arizona Strip, and you run cows out on the Arizona Strip, and you spend a ton of time out there. How are things looking out there, Clay?
Well, right now, they look really good as far as, we've been getting a bunch of rain. It's too late for this year's Antler Growth, of course. So we started getting rain in about the middle of July. And there's places on the Strip that still have been missed with rain, but in the last couple months, we've got a bunch of rain. I dumped there at our house. I dumped 6 inches of rain out, and it's rained probably a couple more inches since then. We have an average rain of 10 inches. So we got a lot in this since July, and okay. I've been out there every day this week so far, and the ground is wet.
So Clay, you get a bunch of rain mid-July. It's a little late to make the antlers what we normally see out on the Arizona Strip, is what I'm hearing. But you talk about from July till now, would you say it's above average rainfall compared to the last 40 years out there on the Strip when you've been out there, or is it about average, or where are we sitting?
I think it's the place around our place the most. It's above average for these months. The monsoons always come in July, but usually the end of July, August, they pretty well stop, and we've continued to get storms. which, again, it's not going to help us this year, but I'm excited about next year because of, because the rains came late. There's a lot of these big deer that didn't end up as big as we hoped. That if they make the season, will be a phenomenal. I've watched it over the years. They, after a down year, it seems like they really explode. But there's, coming back to this year, that's what we really will probably want to talk about. I mean, there's still some big deer. This last week, I've seen 2 deer that I don't have on camera that we're going to try to shoot them. They're big deer,
Good. So, from what I've been hearing, antler growth on a lot of these bucks, whereas, last year, and just feel free to stop me wherever you need to, but let's talk about 13B. Like, on a great year, or let's say a good year, there could be 50 bucks over 200 inches, and there could be some, 230, 240, 250 type bucks. On a year like this, I'm hearing there's like half the number of 200-inch bucks, and then you take that upper high end, and maybe 1 or 2, over that 225 mark total on the strip. Is that a fair assessment, or
no? That is a fair assessment. No, I think that is the way it ended up. In our last visit, I had still hope that it was going to turn out, but it didn't rain in time, and you're right. It's not as good as it was last year by far, but I still think that these hunters that have tags are going to have a chance at a deer of a lifetime. Big deer.
Yeah.
And when I say big deer, I mean it. Go ahead.
Yeah. You talk about your excitement for next year, because it sounds like what you're saying is some of these deer that should be, 220 plus type bucks, maybe 200, and they may get a pass this year. They may not get shot potentially, and they could, with the right conditions, continued moisture, winter moisture, early monsoon. That's a deer that potentially should be 220 this year and could potentially blow up to 240 next year. Is that kind of what I'm hearing you say? Is that
that is what I'm saying? Yeah, they could, and it's still all up in the air. What's happened is, it's just amazing. The last month we just keep getting some storms, and there's in the forecast there's another one coming in 7 days. And you get moisture in the ground before it gets cold, and it just makes for a great spring. And the good spring is what brings that antler growth and makes for giant deer.
So let's talk about the hand that you guys have been dealt this year. So antler growth isn't up to normal, but there's still some big deer. With the clients that you have for the rifle hunt starting in a week, I believe A is first and then B is second. Correct me if I'm wrong. But
yes, that's right.
What are you telling your hunters as far as, I know everyone's probably asking you the magic question, like, what should we expect? What are you telling your hunters this year?
Well, I'm still saying our goal is to get everybody at least a 200-inch deer, and I think it's reachable. I think we can find those 200-inch deer. You jump up to 220, and then you might, that's going to be a little tougher.
Right.
There is some there, and but a lot of people know about them too, which makes it harder.
Yeah. With all of the recent rains, from a perspective of, it sounds like it's pretty widespread rains across the strip. Would you say that the bucks are pretty spread out, whereas on some years they're real congregated around water because it's dry? Would you say the deer compared to a lot of years? They're very spread out and here, there, and everywhere.
Yes, they are. And in fact, that's why I think there could still be some big deer pop up that we don't, just like these ones I've seen this last week. It's been wet since July, and so I've got cameras on A that I haven't had deer hit for 2 months. And yet they're there.
Right.
And so they're, but they are spread out. I've seen them in places that I think, oh man, that's crazy that they're there right now, so yeah, they are spread out, and there's green feed pretty well everywhere. There's pockets on the strip where it just has not rained hardly at all, but yet the majority of it, it's pretty dang good everywhere, and so they can be anywhere, and they're not hitting the water like normal, which is going to make it, could make it difficult for hunting, but it also this where it's good feed and stuff, it also may make the rut kick in a little sooner, which may be pretty exciting that way too.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that. So 13A, correct me if I'm wrong, that hunt is first this year and 13B is second. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And
but the dates,
normally, go ahead.
The dates are actually further back. It's almost like the date for A is what the second hunt almost usually is. So the B hunt is for sure going to be in the rut, in my opinion, and some of the A probably too. Or they're going to be staging and really starting to get after it.
Okay, so even though A is first, what you're saying is that the time frame has been pushed back late enough compared to a lot of years that the A hunt is almost in the B slot time frame, and with as green as it is, you're predicting that potentially at the end of the A hunt, and pretty much you're betting that the B hunt, there's going to be quite a bit of rutting activity.
That's what I think, yeah.
Is there part of you on a year like this when antler growth is not great? Is there almost a part of you that's like, dang it, don't rut so much that you're so out in the open and every, good deer gets killed? Is there part of you that's just like, okay, let's have a bad antler growth year and let's kind of have a mediocre rut and let's let some bucks make it through?
Yeah, everybody else can be that way. I want to kill ours. But, yeah, you want the deer to be the biggest that they can be, and there's deer that we've probably got a hunt that we wished we could just ignore because we know how big that they can be, and but yet you got to be fair to your clients and hunt the biggest deer you know of,
For sure. Clay, I've got a question for you about a lot of these big deer in relationship to cattle, in relationship to pastures that maybe have been grazed more than other pastures. Right now, are you finding bucks right in those pastures where, the cattle are thick, or do they tend to find those areas where the cattle haven't hit as much, or is there no crossover at all?
Well, there's not that much crossover with feed. The cows eat the cliff rows too. But what I've found, is like we have on our ranch, in our summer country, we have 3 pastures. And we move our cows to one pasture, and the deer that are hitting there move back where we just moved them from. And the reason they move is cows are noisy, and and I think they move to, not because they're competing feed-wise, but because deer like to be able to hear better, the cows tromp through, and it's just more stuff going on, and so they're safer to be able to move where cows aren't. But yet I've seen them grazing side by side too, you know what I mean? But I really do think that they will move away from a cow if there's similar feed right by them, you know.
That's interesting that you say that. So do you think it's like a defense mechanism to not want to be by a bunch of cattle that are making all kinds of racket that, you know, they really can hear? Or do you think it's like they just don't even want to be around them? They'd rather be off somewhere where, you know, they can just be off by themselves?
I think it's more the defense. You know, their hearing and their smell is what keeps them alive, and eyes, you know, and so, you know, the cows make a lot of noise. There's more smell to them. So they do move. They will move if, you know, not very far. They won't move far from where they live, but if I've just noticed it in these 3 pastures that we have, that they do move, but yet I've seen them right in them too. So
I've got a question about deer and what you notice that they feed on this time of year. You know, like going into the rifle hunts, you know, this time frame compared to summertime and, you know, when they're in the velvet and during that archery hunt. Do you notice any particular feed that they hit when they're hard antlered like now, or when they're in velvet? Is there any change, or are they feeding on the same thing at all times?
Well, it changes. Like right now, and during the summer when we got those really good rains and the tender plants, you know, like Globe Milo. I mean, they grass small, you know, the real fine stuff, but they like to eat that fresh, real green stuff, and they're still eating it right now because there is still. I mean, it's froze a little bit, but there's still a lot of green, and so they're still chasing green. You know, a lot of times this time of year they kind of almost go completely to cliff rows and brush like that. But now that we're still wet, they're chasing green still. You'll find them out in open flats where there's green. I've noticed that a lot this last 2 weeks that they're out.
Interesting. On years that maybe we wouldn't have these showers that we've had, and let's say you don't have that green up, and let's say we have those early frosts and it kind of frosted up, do you see them pretty much transition to browse and pretty much eating cliff rows and that type of stuff?
Yes, that's what for sure. Yeah, that's what I've noticed.
Okay. I've got a question that has come in. I put out on Instagram to ask a few questions of you, and there's a question from Shul5 on Instagram. He says, what is Clay's number one tactic to consistently turning up giant bucks every year?
Spending time in the field. I mean, constantly. I mean, I'm out there working, but I always have my binoculars with me. I always have my tripod. I've got everything with me, even when I'm working cows or working on catchments, you know, building waters. I'm always looking. I try to leave the house so that I'm in a place where I can scout at daylight and at night. It's just the hours in the field that, to put you there so you know where a big deer is, so that then you can try to kill it.
So with that being said, Clay, obviously running your cows out there, obviously growing up out there and spending all kinds of time, I mean, pretty much all of your time is spent out there on the strip. To further the Mr. Scholl's question, would you say that there's deer that you watch? In other words, you watch them as a 2-year-old, you watch them as a 3-year-old, you watch them and you kind of get to know this deer and that deer, and then some deer start blowing up and getting bigger, but you've watched that deer for the last handful of years. So in other words, these deer that you're killing, a lot of them you've seen. Obviously the strip's a huge place, but correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of these deer you've kind of seen from time to time throughout different parts of the year, and you've watched them grow from when you can, hardly tell that they're a, decent buck to all of a sudden now they're a giant buck. I mean, it's not like these bucks, a lot of these bucks you killed, just all of a sudden you've never seen them before and you kill them, right?
Right. No, you do. We're everybody's really good with cameras nowadays, and then a lot of time scouting, glassing, and we keep an inventory of these deer and know what they were last year, and so then it's hard to tell what a 2-year-old buck, what he'll be, and time they hit 3 and time they get a pretty good frame on them, then you can tell from year to year what they are, and they may have an earmark on them or something about them that, a certain way a horn grows or an antler grows, and so you can tell from year to year, and we do follow them, and that's what's so exciting about it is to follow a deer, and to follow it for a bunch of years and then be able to harvest it, and that's what makes it a lot of fun.
Oh, I'm sure. Is there any particular deer, diving further into this question, is there any particular deer that you have harvested that say, what I'm curious about is maybe a deer, if there's a story of a deer that, you watched consistently in one area and he was always kind of in, over a course of a year or two, he always kind of hung in one area, and then all of a sudden, you kill him 20 miles away or something. Are deer that nomadic, or are the big deer typically more home range and you kind of, within a mile or two they're going to be in that area? Or are there cases where, you follow a deer and then all of a sudden he's moved 20, 30 miles away?
Not so much 20 or 30. 10 miles, yes.
Okay.
10, 15 miles. One of the deer we killed last year, we got a picture of him on A, and then he dropped off down into B, probably, as a crow flies, it was probably 12 miles. And
was that to go rut? Was that a rutting deer? Like he left? Okay.
Yeah.
So is that common to see, bucks that will kind of summer in a certain area, and then you kind of know to expect them to show up? And then is that part of being out there on the strip, as much as you are kind of saying, okay, there's a deer over here, but I know he's probably going to make a move and he should show up over here. Is that the game you play?
Well, we do play that. What some of these deer that grow up in the mountain, in the higher country, they then in the winter and during the rut they drop down to where the does are, and the does also drop down to a certain whatever they're going to go. But you get a deer out in, say, in the middle of B, in them low rolling hills, he's not going to go, if he summers there, he's going to be within 4 or 5 miles, But if they do go up to a higher elevation to summer, if they're close to an area where there is a higher elevation, then sometimes they will drop off and move quite a bit further than one that's just out in the flats. Is what I've found anyway.
And do you find that most of those deer that do kind of make a move, do they normally make a move every year? Or have you seen cases where a buck's moved 2 or 3 years and then all of a sudden he never comes out and he stays? Have you seen those anomaly cases where, you're waiting on a buck to show up and then all of a sudden he's right back up and he never comes down at all? Is there anything that you can think of, or pretty much always they kind of follow that pattern?
Well, I don't know that I've noticed some that some just don't show up, and we wonder whether a lion killed them or whether they're, another hunter's killed them. A lot of times they do follow that pattern. They'll go back to, it may be their mothers took them there to that lower country when they were babies, and so they still follow that same route and kind of, it's a pattern they have. And just the opposite, if they live in a lower place, that's their mother just lived there, and that, I think they, the bucks, when they get a little older, they'll spread out and kind of get their own territory a little bit, but, to rut, they all come back together, when they're growing their horns, their antlers and stuff, but, yeah.
I've got another question from AZJ Cole, Open Desert. He says, has there been in the past or any talk of the future of transferring does, I assume he's talking about game and fish, transferring does from the Arizona Strip to general units? In other words, Clay, have you heard of the game and fish ever transplanting deer from the Strip in other parts of Arizona?
I don't know that I have. I think they transplanted some from the Kaibab to Santa Rosa Island, out. I don't know if that's the name of it.
I think I remember that.
Okay, and I know that they probably 25 years ago they brought some deer from Utah, I think, into Arizona. Onto A, okay. But I don't know that from the Strip they've taken any, and they could take a bunch from the Kaibab and move them somewhere, but it'd be very hard to get too many deer from the Strip because there's not that many.
It's not that many deer. It'd be a hard capture job, sure.
The thing is. Go ahead.
No. The thing is what?
I was just going to say, it's like, a lot of these neighboring states, like Utah and Nevada, and they've got the genetics for big deer. They just don't manage them for big deer.
Yeah.
Where the Strip is managed for trophy deer, and so the deer have a chance to get 5, 6, 10, 9 years old deer. Where a lot of these other areas, and even southern Arizona, they overhunt them. And the genetics are here. They just need to have a chance to grow up. And that's why, I'm just fortunate to live here on the Strip, and where it's managed right, and we're able to get 8, 9-year-old deer, to be their full potential.
In your opinion, Clay, what year or what 2 years would a buck reach maximum potential before the buck starts to go downhill and starts to regress? Like, what is the prime year, in your opinion, on the Arizona Strip for a buck?
Well, I think from a 5-year-old up to a 9-year-old buck, anywhere in those years is where he can, if we have the good weather, he can be phenomenal. That big deer we killed last year was a 9-year-old deer, and as a 4 and a 5-year-old deer, he wasn't that big. But when you have it, it's like when the stars all line up, when you got the right age and you got the right moisture, is when it happens. And then I think after 9, 10, they start dropping off. They're still big deer, but they're not going to have the tine length,
At that point, they start growing a lot of mass, and their points start stubbing out, not as long a point. Sometimes they'll add kickers and trash and stuff right as they get older and older.
Yeah. But their kickers won't be as long either. They'll be smaller. But
what about does on the Arizona Strip? Either in your opinion or specifically, ages that you know of, like what age do does finally get where they're regressing and their bodies are shrinking up and they almost die? In other words, in your opinion, what's like the prime lifespan of a doe and then on the Arizona Strip, and then when do most does, kick the bucket?
Well, I don't really know for sure. I think that they have probably about a 10-year lifespan too. Just because if you look at a buck's teeth, I've never really looked at many does' teeth to know, but them bucks, when they're getting 10, their teeth are getting short, and so they don't do as well. And so that's the same with them does. If their teeth are not doing well, then they can't get the body fat to produce offspring, and so I'm thinking 10 years, but I that's just kind of what I've always thought. I don't know whether I'm right or not.
Okay. I want to take a quick break here to thank the sponsors of the podcast. I also want to thank the listeners of the podcast and the loyal support that the listeners give me and give this podcast. This podcast wouldn't be possible. I wouldn't be able to devote the amount of time that I do if it wasn't for the sponsors. I want to thank GoHunt.com, the gear shop. My friend Cody Nelson of 20-plus years is the new manager. He used to be over at the Outdoorsman's. He's now at the Go Hunt gear shop. He is the optics manager over there at Go Hunt. He is a great friend of mine, and he handles everything in regards to binoculars, spotting scopes, rifle scopes, tripods, and any of the other great gear at the Go Hunt gear shop. And I encourage you guys, if you have any optic or optical needs, need a tripod, need a new rifle scope, give Cody a call. He is the manager. He will pick up the phone. You can reach him at 702-847-8747, extension 2. And I've been giving him a hard time that he hasn't worked his way up to being extension 1 yet, but reach him at extension 2. Or you can send him an email at optics@gohunt.com. He's promised me that he will take care of the J. Scott Outdoors listeners, and I've already been contacted by a bunch of listeners who have dealt with Cody, and Cody did a good job taking care of him. So I encourage you to reach out to Cody, the optics manager at Go Hunt Gear Shop. I also want to thank KUIU, KUIU.com, KUIU Ultralight Hunting. That is the gear, the clothing, the packs that I wear. I've been wearing it since 2010. I want to thank KUIU for the ship. I also want to thank Canyon Coolers, based right out of Flagstaff, Arizona. If you use the J. Scott promo code at canyoncoolers.com, you're going to get a 10% discount. And then Phone Scope. Clay, I know you take a lot of great Phone Scope videos and photos yourself. Scope.com, if you use the JScott18, that's all one word, JScott18, you're going to get a 10% discount there at phonescope.com. That is what I use with my iPhone X, and been getting some great video and pictures here at the Ot6 Ranch this fall. Clay, moving forward with this season right around the corner, obviously you want to get your clients the best bucks they can. Would it surprise you if a deer, let's say 240 plus, surface this year? Would it surprise you if a deer like that got harvested, or is that really reaching on a year like this?
I think that there will be one killed that big this year.
Okay. And obviously moving forward, when you're looking at next year, and we've already kind of hit on it, but there is a sense of optimism with the amount of feed that's out there and the amount of quote-unquote holdover bucks that potentially may sneak through because they're spread out this year. They're not congregated on water. You're feeling pretty optimistic if everything stays the same and if we can get continued moisture that next year could be one of those banner years. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I've watched it over the years how we'll have a drought, and then for some reason the next year, if it's good, then deer just seem to rebound. I don't know whether they've stored up the ball. I don't know whatever makes the antlers, calcium or whatever, and then it just seems to come back stronger the next year if it's a good year. So yeah, I'm real optimistic about that, and then there's always just young bucks coming. That's what's so neat about the Strip and everywhere is there's new bucks that are going to show up, young bucks that we'll follow, that we'll name them and hopefully harvest them.
Yeah.
So it's just neat to see how nature works.
For sure. Got another question from an Instagram follower. Obviously, this isn't a Strip question, but he says, this is from Travis Harper. He says, my dad has a Kaibab 12B late rifle tag. What would the strategy be in that unit for mild weather versus nasty, cold, snowy weather? So in other words, 12B late rifle, he wants to know what your strategy would be for hunting if it was mild and warm versus, cold and snowy. Is there any change in what you would do?
Well, if it does get cold and snowy, the deer will be lower, I feel. The 12B, there's 12B and there's 12B West, and that might make a difference of what he has. If he's got just a 12B, then he can hunt both sides, the remaining cliffs, and then clear over down on gun sight. I like hunting the lower stuff down by gun sight. It's open. It's if it's snowy, and those deer are going to be down there, and you can get around on those roads, and it's where if it stays warm, they may stay up a little higher.
Isn't it? The question was about 12B, but if we bring that back to the Strip specifically, if you've got warm weather on the Strip, you've got probably deer that are hitting the trick tanks and a little more congregated around water, correct? And if you've got kind of wet, rainy, snowy, colder weather, the deer are not going to come to the trick tanks and come to the water as much.
So I would hunt further out on the points, further out on the, further from water. But those bucks seem like, they'll come check water if it's in the rut, even whether they need a drink or not. And but yes, you can push further out from where they've been. Yeah.
In other words, in more moisture times, wetter, rainier, they could potentially be further from those drinkers, further from the tank. So when you say go up further on those points, you're meaning they could expand their range and they're not quite as concentrated and as close. So you have to make sure that you're covering all of the country rather than just some of the stuff, within a pretty easy walk for them from the waters, correct?
Yes, and if they move out from waters, follow the feed, see where the feed is, and move out where, and I guess that's a little bit of the advantage of us is we live there. We know where when it storms, we know where the deer move to. They do move out further where other feed is, and once it starts raining and gets cold like that, then they don't come back to water. They may not come back to water for a month. If there's dew and snow or anything like that, they don't need to water. So,
Clay, a question that comes to my mind: how important in your actual hunting and harvesting big bucks does tracking play? As far as, do you lean heavily on your ability to track, or do you lean more on your optics? I'm kind of curious how a guy like you, you spend a lot of time on horseback, I would assume, and you have over your life, and you probably are constantly checking tracks with your cattle and what have you. How important is tracking for your success?
Well, I find the deer with my optics, and then if we see him and go after him, and he goes over the hill out of sight, and we go to his tracks, and then track him. But we don't just. I've done it before, to just go to a pond or a trick tank and follow a track out. But it's not that productive. It's more productive to be on a hill using your optics and let them work for you. Let your eyes work instead of your legs, And but we do track, and it's a skill to track too,
For sure. Speaking of optics, what are your go-to optics, either around your neck or in your pack? Like, what are you using that works best for your eyes right now?
I 15 by 56 Swarovskis, the HDs.
Okay.
Is what I'm using.
Now, are those around your neck?
I have them on my tripod. What's that?
Okay. So you're
I have them on my.
Okay.
I have them on my tripod at all times. In my truck, everywhere I go, I've got my 15s already hooked up. So as soon as if I step out the truck, I'm glassing.
Okay.
I don't hardly ever take them off.
Do you carry like a 10 or an 8 around your neck, or are you constantly carrying your tripod basically over your shoulder and you're always using the 15s, either standing up on a tripod or using it as a monopod, or do you just sometimes hold the tripod? Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, what I do is, like I said, I have my 15s hooked to it, and I grab hold of the handle and stick the legs underneath my arm on my right hand,
okay.
And I've got them halfway extended. I like to glass sitting down. I don't like to glass standing up because there's too much movement. I like to be able to sit down, and so my tripod legs are out where I sit down, and but I pack them like that everywhere. If we go for a hike, I pack them like that. I've got I usually have my docks in the back in my pack, and but my 15s is what I use. They're the most. For my country where it's kind of open, you need that long look. I like 10s too, but 15s can do both.
And then did I hear you say you have your doctors sometimes in your pack, which are what, the 40 super wide angle doctors or the 20 by 50s, or what are you using?
They're the 40 fix, yeah.
Okay. Okay. And so you always have your 15s mounted on a tripod, and you take your doctors a lot of times, but you always have your 15s.
Always have my 15s.
And then will you have a spotting scope sometimes as well, or just your 15s, or just your doctors?
I have my 15s and my doctors. That's all. I don't have a spotting scope.
Okay.
For some reason, my eyes, if I shut one eye, then I don't like to look through one eye. I like both.
If you shut one eye, you end up walking in circles after you open the eye. That's what I do sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So you're using the 40 super wide angle doctors, but your go-to is the 15 mounted on a tripod. Now, when you're on the go, kind of, like, obviously you like to sit down, but you talk about if you kind of hold them under your arm and you hold them up and kind of check glass as you're walking maybe a ridge top, and then when you want to...
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll just kind of hold it up, and hold on the legs and look for a quick look. But I'm telling you, if there's more than just a quick look, I'm down just as fast as I can so I can get steady and look, and
sure.
Then you can judge a deer fast too. If it's still, you can tell in an instant whether it's a big deer or whether it's one you've been watching, and whether you should need to kill it. Where if it's moving, it's like I'm not sure,
Yeah.
And so I like to.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip to tell people to get as steady as they can, sit down as quick as you can, and be able to get on that deer immediately. Because sometimes, wouldn't you agree, it's a 3-second decision whether you're going to waste all day on that deer or nope, he's not as big as I thought. I mean, you need to be as steady as you can, and you need to be able to make that split-second decision, right?
Yes, you do. And it's, a lot of times when they're split-second like that, they're going away, and so they look giant,
Right.
And you need to be able to say, yeah, that's the deer we want, or no. And it, I've made a lot of split-second decisions like that, and you're sure, but then you kill him and you go, oh boy, let's hope that's,
Yeah.
but and most of the time it's worked out, but it's because you are rock steady,
right,
that you can make that decision.
If there was one certain look of a deer, in other words, if you had to only have a 3 to 5 second look, what angle, what position, like, how do you want that deer? Do you want him looking at you? Do you want him broadside, looking perpendicular? Do you want him looking away? If you only had one look, what do you want?
I want him broadside, swinging back his head, looking right at me. Then
I
you
agree.
can tell.
I agree with that.
You can tell where his ears are, how wide he is. That's the look he's going to be on your wall. You know what I mean? And if he's got that look, then he's a shooter or not.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like broadside, you get a sense of their body. When they turn back and look at you, like you said, you get a sense of their ear width. You get a sense of how the rack falls within the ear. You can see all of the forks. Like that's the look.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a few more questions, and then I'll let you go because I know your time's precious. 13A typically over the years has not been as good of unit as far as people always say B is better than A. I assume that this year that's no different. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's no different. I mean, in 2010, A smashed B, but since then it's fallen off. But yeah, just because it's a big area, more deer country. But there's some big deer in A right now.
And you speak about 2010. Wasn't that the year that the moisture was just right. The green grass, those bucks just came out and were rutting. They were all over the does. And like, I want to say there was 10 bucks over 220 or something shot that year.
Yeah. In fact, in both units, there's over 20 that were 220, yeah.
Wow. Wow. Okay, so there's still some big deer in A, but B is going to outshine. Do you ever see that changing, or is there just more deer in B that, you know, that there's always just going to be more bigger deer in B just because of numbers?
Just because of numbers. I mean, the genetics they're just the same. They're as good as genetics. They're just more area, more deer, or more deer to pick from, really, is what it is.
Right. So you've got the same genetic makeup, and you just have more deer, so obviously there's going to be more big, solid deer in the area where there is more deer.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Moving forward with A and B, if anybody out there has a tag, are there any opportunities? Do you have any openings per se in A or B if someone needed a guide?
Yeah, we could actually take more in. We could take a couple in both units if there's available. We've got plenty of guides, licensed guides that help us, and that we could do it. So we'd love to if there's a chance. I mean, it's close, and I'm sure everybody's all booked up already. But if all of a sudden, the last minute, you change your mind, we'd love to help you.
That sounds good. And I'd like to give you a chance to let the listeners know the best way to get a hold of you. Obviously, whether it be about this year or putting in the future, looking at next year, how is the best way for people to either reach you, find out about you, etc.?
Okay, so I'm a phone guy, so my phone number is 435-680-2991. Or you could reach me on Instagram, Clay Bundy Outfitters, or my email is claybundy@hotmail.com. So those three ways are the best.
Perfect. What about sheep hunters this year? Are you going on sheep hunts? Do you have sheep hunt, or did you drew it out already?
Yeah, so we've got a client on 13B North.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So,
awesome. How's the herd in 13B North looking?
It's not what it was 15 years ago, but there's some good rams. I think we'll do all right.
Good.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, Clay, I really appreciate you spending time with us tonight, and I look forward. I love watching your Instagram, and I look forward to seeing your success this year. And I always love talking to you and getting, boots on the ground knowledge, and as much time as you've spent out there. It's always great getting that knowledge from you, and I know the listeners enjoy it. So I really appreciate you coming on. God bless you, and just knock them dead on this hunt. I know you guys, you always do, so I look forward to seeing the pictures.
Well, we hope so, and I appreciate you and even considering me for this, and it's an honor and a privilege to do it with you. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. Sounds good. Well, God bless. Look forward to seeing you down whenever that may be. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. And
thank you.
Like I said, look forward to checking out your Instagram, Clay Bundy Outfitters on Instagram. It's an awesome page. So sounds good. God bless.
Thank you. See you. Bye.
All right, buddy.